everyone. Welcome. My name is Jackie. I'm the event host for this evening, and I'm thrilled to have you all joining us as we present Cindy House and Leah Glennon here to discuss the release of Mother Noise. So very, very exciting. Thank you all for being here. Before I hand it over to them to start their conversation, I just want to give you a little background on our special guest. I know many of you already know, but Cindy House is an essayist, short story writer, artist, and regular opener for David Sedaris, here to discuss Mother Noise, a powerful memoir told in essays and graphic shorts about what life looks like 20 years after recovery from addiction and how to live with the past as a parent, writer, and sober person. As described by David Sedaris, New York Times bestselling author, quote, "The scope of Cindy House's knowledge is as remarkable as her humor, her depth, and her great skill as an essayist. This is her time." And she is joined by Leah Glennon, writer of both fiction and memoir, currently working with private clients, both as a writer and editor, and on a collection of essays based on her life growing up in Manhattan during the late 60s and early 70s. So we certainly can't wait to get our hands on those soon. And so I will hand it over to you, and I will be back a little bit later to wrap us up. Enjoy.
So we're just going to have a little chat.
Yes.
So obviously I've read the book, and it's amazing. It blew me away. And I promise you'll all feel the same way. So I want to ask you a couple of really intense questions. No, honestly. So the first thing I wanted to know was, Mother Noise is extremely self-revelatory, and it describes times in your life when you were at your lowest point. And what I want to know is, how did you come to write something so personal?
I think it started when I was in my MFA program. I went there as a fiction student, and I think as a writer you always have to tell the truth. And while I was there working, I just realized all these stories were rising to the top, and really could not be denied. And then I ended up writing an essay about my friendship with David, because I realized that I felt like David had really saved my life, David Sedaris, because he just never gave up on me. And so it started there. And then also there was a woman in my community who had a daughter in our school system, and on her Facebook she would often post about her recovery, and she was newer to recovery than I was, but I was so moved by her bravery and how open she was about her whole experience. And she was a part of, all of the parents I knew, and she had a child, and I just felt like it's really, I don't have to carry this shame anymore. Like, I don't have to live this way. And I ended up, I wrote one essay, it's in the book, and she was in the essay, and then I sent it to her, and we had this amazing conversation where I just thanked her for being so. I remember the night where I wanted to write about her, she had this post that said, "The thing that's holding you back might be that you think something's holding you back. Grateful to be in recovery." And so I was so inspired by how she was living, and that she was just out there with it. And she knows this. I've since talked to her about her place in the book, and so I think those two things, being in school where I was really trying to dig deep and tell the truth, and then seeing this woman live this way.
So coming to that, I was wondering, was there someone along the path, aside from this friend that you knew, a particular mentor or someone who really has inspired you? I know you worked with David Sedaris, but were there other people, or we can talk about your experience, your relationship with David, who really supported you and inspired you?
I think it starts with David because I started working with him when I was 19, and he really taught me what the mentor relationship is and how important it is. So by the time I got to grad school, I could slip right into that, and I had several teachers, all really great writers, Hester Kaplan, Bill Lychek, and Michael Lowenthal, and they probably have books, they probably have some of their books, but all three of them especially, but probably every teacher there, but those three I did more intensive work with, and were just really important to the book and my path, and you know, I had David for so many years, and it was interesting to have other input and other relationships with writers, and there isn't a day that I'm not so grateful I went to grad school.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, and you don't have to have an MFA to be a writer, but I think that for me it was something I needed to do.
Right, and so when you ended up going to grad school in your late 40s, and what was the impetus to go at that time?
I think that I wanted to learn a discipline, and I wanted to take myself seriously. And you know, there's nothing like shelling out that kind of money to like really be like, I better do this.
Right.
And I remember one of my first seminars in grad school with Bill Lychek, and I remember him saying, this is the time where you put everything else aside, because when you're a writer, you put your writing aside because you have to make dinner, or you have all of these obligations, you have a job, and he said, you know, you're here now, this is the time where you let everything else go, and which was really freeing to hear. And when I did my thank yous at my graduating reading, I apologized to my son for not cooking for 2 years, because I pretty much didn't, but it's Bill Lychek's fault that I didn't cook for 2 years.
No. And you went in though as a fiction writer,
I
and
did.
you ended up writing a memoir. Can you tell us how that played out for you?
In my program, our program that you went to too, they had us do an interdisciplinary project a couple of times, so you had to do something outside of your genre. And so I worked with Michael Lowenthal, and I decided I would write a nonfiction essay about my friendship with David. And you know, as I was doing that, it was the first time that I really laid out like the addiction and just everything, and the experience of doing that. I guess I always felt like fiction is so safe because you can say it's fiction. You know, if somebody says, "Oh my God, did that really happen?"
Right.
And I remember one time David Sedaris saying, well, it's about a fiction thing he wrote, well, it's true enough for you. Somebody said, is that true? So that was always like very comforting.
Yeah.
But once I wrote this true piece about David Sedaris, I realized like that's where I need to go right now.
Yeah.
And now right now my second book I'm working on is a novel, so I've gone back to fiction, and it's nice to like do a little of everything, but it feels good to be back in fiction because I just outed myself to the whole world. So now I can say like, I don't know if that happened, it doesn't matter, it's fiction. So it's nice to go back and forth, but and I never thought a memoir would be my first book.
Oh, really?
Never.
What did you think it would be?
I thought it would be a collection of stories. A story, which, as it turns out, it's really hard to sell that right now. Really hard to get an agent for a story collection, so it all worked out, but
That's great.
it just sort of fell together.
Do you feel like just at some point in the future you might do something like this again, like something?
Yes.
You do.
I have like a couple of, well, when I finished and sent in the final manuscript, I sent my agents for book ideas and laid out what they were, and 2 were fiction and 2 were nonfiction. So I definitely have more stuff to say. I don't, it's, yeah, I mean, we'll see if it fleshes out.
Right.
But I think so, yeah.
I hope you do. So I wanted to ask as well, and I don't know if everyone realizes, Cindy is also an amazing artist, and you've included some beautiful graphic illustrations in the book of you, of your son, and of other things, of you at different ages. Can you tell me why you decided to include those?
I did a lot of drawing in the pandemic.
Mhm.
It was really soothing, but the thing that really locked the drawings in was my editor. The opening essay talks about deciding that I should tell my son about my history. And my editor said, I really think you need a piece where you actually do tell him, because you set it up, and I think that would be something that needs to be in the book. And when I started trying to write an essay about that, and it wasn't really flowing, and then I realized that when I told my son about my history, he was about 9, and I was really staring at his face to see, you know, how is he taking this? Because it's a lot to tell a kid. And so the whole moment in my memory is just looking at his face. And so I realized if I did a short graphic narrative where I just did drawings of his face as I told him, that would hold more weight or hold it in a different way than like an entire essay. And then after that, it was other pieces sort of seemed logical to use drawings and do it that way.
It's really effective. I mean, it's so compelling to see those drawings, and it's, you know, it's not the usual, you know, tend to find that in a memoir someone's, you know, rendering of their own memories in that way, and I thought that was really, really a lovely extra piece of you. I also wanted to know, so I know we talked about this woman in your community, but was there a specific moment or like a real catalyst that made you come to the decision that I really do have to write this? I just can't keep it to myself anymore, or this is something I do need to bring out and process in this way?
I think it started with realizing that I should tell my son, because I realized that you know, not telling something that is such a big part of my past before he was born is like a lie, and I didn't want to feel like he would ever end up feeling like he doesn't know me. And I was also in a very tricky divorce situation, and so I had some fear that someone else might tell him, which would be terrible, because if somebody else tells someone something, then it's really like a lie. So I did feel like it's something I needed to say. And then as I was writing through grad school and after grad school, everything I was writing was just about this in different ways. And I'm sorry, what was the question?
So no, you're answering it. I mean, was there a catalyst or something that really made you decide, I do have to tell this story?
Yes.
And that makes
It's
sense.
horrible when you're like, what am I talking about?
No, you were right on it the whole time. So I also want to know, when you told your son about your past, I know that something unusual happened and he had a reaction you didn't expect. I don't want to hear about that too. But then also what I'm wondering is what the understanding is now between the two of you, and how has it progressed since that first time?
Yeah, when I told him, I had sort of thought of every reaction he might have and tried to prepare myself for it. And then he laughed because he didn't, I guess it seemed preposterous. He was kind of like, shut up. He was like, no. And so then I thought, oh God, now I've got to convince him that I had been an addict. Like, I have to say, like, no, I really was. So that was a very strange moment. I'm talking about you. He's like an old soul, and I think that he understood things about the history that, I mean, it wasn't, and I understood that I would give him an age-appropriate small piece of it, and that it was an ongoing conversation, and which it is. And because the other part is, like, I was in an NA meeting a couple of weeks ago, and there was a woman talking about the healing she has to do with her children because they saw her in her addiction. And I just thought, oh, that would be so difficult.
Yeah.
So I think it's different when you're telling your child something that happened long before he was born. And my heart goes out to people who have to heal that kind of relationship with their children. So I think it's not a difficult thing. It doesn't come up that much, but just, yeah, it's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, I can imagine. And then now, the book's about to come out, officially on Tuesday.
Yes.
So I imagine there are people that know you that don't know your past, or people who, don't know you at all, and this is all, about to be something they do know. And have you had to deal with any of that already, with people coming and saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea?
No, I'm bracing though. I mean, people know you in all different ways,
Yes.
and I'm sure there's someone who's going to be like, I don't know. I don't know what to expect really,
Yeah.
but one thing that has happened is I've connected with addicts.
Mhm.
Like I had an addict contact me and say she's interested in the book, and I had a writer who did an interview with me whose brother died in his addiction just 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And that kind of connecting is so important to me, and I've been trying to think of like, how can I serve addicts, like, and one way is before I wrote the book, if you just keep it quiet, you just contribute to the stigma and the shame, and so speaking about it, that's one side effect. And as I talk about the book, I am trying to think of like, how can I, serve the community. And I just started going back to NA meetings before the book came out as like extra support. And so one night I had said, the meeting was about making amends, and I talked about the book coming out, and people were unbelievably kind. And I forgot, like in those rooms when you go to these meetings, like there's like big huge men hugging each other, and people are so supportive. And those are the people I would want to affect in a positive way. Because in this country there is very little treatment, and there's still a lot of shame. And now you have people in rooms and it's free, and AA is free, and they are there for each other, and they have no tools, no resources, and they're keeping each other sober. And it is just, it just moves me. I think it's amazing, so.
So as, was that in your mind before you sat down and wrote that it also might, not aside from the reasons we talked about, was that in the forefront of your mind that it would also be something that would be inspiring and perhaps helpful to people who were struggling with something similar?
No. It might have like occurred to me at different times, but I think when I was in it, it was just trying to write it truthfully, just trying to put down what happened, and it was kind of like a thing that happened after. And going back to NA meetings was really helpful, because it just made me remember, and it made me have that admiration for these people who are working so hard to stay clean, and it was good to do.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm wondering if anyone has any questions they would like to ask Cindy directly. Don't be shy. Is that a hand?
Yeah.
Hi, sure, go ahead.
Hi, Cindy, it's so good to see you.
You too. Thank you for coming.
Oh, absolutely. So what is it like to write about yourself and create essentially a character who appears in the book, and then also have like Cindy's life, right? And was there a process where we're kind of living alongside the person who appears in the book in addition to your own life, and how did that feel?
I think one thing thing that's strange when you write a book is that it takes like 2 years to get to this point. So there's so many revisions and just time that went by. And I think that I was in a different place when I started it. And there is a feeling of like wondering if people really feel like they know me when they read the book. And there's different, I mean, parts of the book are very gritty and really unhappy. I feel like a really happy person. So having that out there is strange. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's definitely a weird, especially I never wanted or thought of writing memoir. So and after I realized, like, oh, this is going to be my first book, it was kind of like, oh shit, you know, I didn't know if I thought that through, but, so it's weird, it's just very weird.
Anybody else?
Now that you've written the thing and gone through the, work of getting it published and then hearing feedback and there's actual real buzz and now it's coming out, how does that affect how you're approaching the project you're working on now and not that long? So you're a different person in terms of confidence and all that?
That's a really good question. I was so scared that I would be so altered. First of all, I thought all the reviews would be awful. And so I thought, I'll never write again if that, once it comes out, that's it for me. So I made sure I had a second book well underway. Because, when you start a book, it goes through all different, I just threw out 62 pages of the second book, but I had enough that it didn't kill me. But I think that I knew enough somehow to know to just keep my head in the work and because I was so worried that I would be affected in a bad way, especially if there were bad reviews. So I just tried to I would turn in the next revision and then I would go to the second book. And I just kept working on the second book as much as I could. And honestly, promoting the book is not my favorite part. It's kind of terrifying and, I'm not always that articulate about it. I really like the work. I really like to be holed up in my house writing. And so for as long as I'm able to have a career, I'm just gonna make sure I have another project started and try to just stay in that. But one of the benefits of publishing a book is you get all of these incredibly smart people behind your book. I think this book would not be where it is without Mary Sue Rucci, who is my editor, and I have 2 agents. They're both amazing. So I think you write alone for decades, and then suddenly you have the smartest person, like a genius, who's like, let me help you with this. And that is nice. So that helps a lot, because I know, I sent the draft of my second book to my agents, and they had 3 points, and I don't think oh, I don't know if that's right. I think I'm gonna do what Dan says today. I'm gonna cut those pages, they're gone. And that is really helpful. And I don't think I quite realized that before I sold a book, how much help I would have. It's so nice. Yeah.
Anybody else?
As I was like,
Thank you,
how
Jean.
did you keep yourself from revising anything that happened in the past and kind of sticking with your truth?
Well, that's a really good question. I think when you're not telling the truth, it just feels gross. It just feels like you're cheating, or I don't know. And then the other piece is when there are parts of this book that I wrote and I just cried. I'd finish an essay and I would just cry for 2 days. And I realized if I don't feel that, if I don't feel like it's true and I really dug in there and I really laid it out, the reader's not gonna feel that. When I'm reading a book, especially nonfiction, there are some books I can't finish because I feel like, this is, and it's not that they're lying, it's like a spin, or it's kind of, I mean, I didn't tell every single thing that ever happened to me in the last 20 years in great detail, but what I did write about, I tried to be as honest, not just on the paper, but with myself, and I don't think I would know how to not do that, because it would feel awful. But that's a very good question.
Anybody else?
What is your writing day-to-day like?
I write every day, even if it's just an hour or something, but, and I never used to be like this. I would put it off, or I would write, once a week, or, I think grad school helped me with that. Sometimes it's revising, sometimes I'm really trying to work towards a word count. Right now I feel I'm using all the nervous energy of this book coming out to be really hard on myself and force myself to write, because when I am writing the second book, none of this exists. But finding that discipline, I think it took 20 years. I don't think I had that for a long time. I mean, of course, I'm on Twitter and eating gummy bears and stuff too, so I'm not that much of a taskmaster. So, thank you.
That was actually what I was gonna ask next, is tell us about your process. So, but do you have in mind sort of, today I will write for X number of hours?
I usually, when I wake up, I look over what I did the night before. I write at night a lot because everything's quiet, and sometimes I will force myself, I'll say I'm not going to sleep till 1 o'clock, I've got to get this section done, or when I was working on Mother Noise and I had to turn in revisions, I had to do it. And I know that writers sometimes will tell their editor, I didn't get it done, but I was so grateful that someone bought my book, and I was so afraid, she would just be nope, forget it, and snatch it back, that I just refused to ever be late with a revision. So that helped the discipline too. I just, whatever I had to do to get to turn in the next draft, I did it.
And how, were there big chunks of this book that you ended up not using?
Actually, not too much, but the last essay in the book I wrote after the book sold, and I was adding it to the book, and my editor sent it back to me. Everything was cross-checked for one paragraph. And I was okay, so I had to, figure out what was so good about that one paragraph, or not so good, what was tolerable, and then sort of expand it. But when I got that back, I was this is scary. But good, it's good, And I think in grad school you learn to take criticism. You learn to just, yeah.
And also, so the book is not exactly chronological.
No.
So how did you come to that? Because, you think to yourself, I'm going to tell a memoir, I'm going to start from the beginning and then go to the end. So how did you decide not to do that?
I think that each essay, or most of the essays in the book stand alone, and I've written them separately to try to publish alone. And so doing it chronologically didn't make sense, and I don't really like that. If the writing feels tedious sometimes, because people are oh God, I gotta get through 5th grade this week, and I don't want to read that. So when I first was putting it together for my agent, I made index cards with each essay. I had a little drawing, and I was taping them on my office wall and moving them and trying to figure it out. And then I had an editor that I hire for when I open for David, and I write show essays, and she said, I think you need to open with the essay where you talk about needing to tell your son about your history. And I was I did not see it, but that is sort of the whole thesis of the book, is I have this past and I need to talk about it. And once she said that, everything just felt right in line. So Debbie Sosin, bless her.
That must have felt really good.
It did.
And were there moments when you were trying to write about something that had happened and your memory was a little foggy? Or how did you have to say, hey, you know, remember me from, you know, 8th grade, do you remember that terrible bus ride to, you know, to Great Adventure or whatever?
Yeah, I didn't really talk to people very much, but one thing I did was, and my mother had slides from our childhood and boxes and boxes and boxes, and I bought a converter so you can put them up on your laptop. And so I just went through, and it was really, and it was the pandemic, so, you know, what else was I gonna do? So I literally looked at, like, every single thing from mine and my brother's childhood, and that just sort of sparked, like, my addiction started with clinical depression. And so, you know, going back and seeing myself as a child just put me in a different place.
Yeah.
And the other thing I did is I toured Chicago on Street View, you know,
Yes.
on my laptop. So I went to like all the neighborhoods where I had
That's so
been,
smart.
and that was really chilling. Like, there were times where I was like, I really need to stop doing that now. And that was really helpful.
Okay, and I'm sure there are writers in the room. I have to ask this. When
Yes.
you hit a moment of writer's block and you just can't figure out what you're going to do, what do you do? What helps you?
I refuse to have writer's block. I will not allow it. I always have more than one project going. And I also started walking last June, and I'm not a physical person. I hate exercise so much. But I started walking last June, and I use it now. Like, if I'm stuck on something, I'll think of, and it can't be something I need to take notes on. It'll be like a big picture issue, like structure, or you know, why this character isn't working. And I'll start the walk with that in my head. And a lot of times I come back with the solution. So I just have tried to build in ways around it. It's all tricking yourself.
Yes.
And the minute you say like, oh, I have writer's block, like, you have writer's block.
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah. But if you say like, oh, I just write this other thing for a little while. And the other thing that helps is reading writers who are working on something similar. That always helps me. Or reading something just amazingly beautiful,
Yeah.
even if it's not connected to anything I'm doing, because it just makes you want to try to be that good.
for
You
sure.
probably can't be, but to think like, you know, I'm so moved by this person's book, and it makes you want to write, I think.
And, you know, and the book obviously is quite serious and, you know, heavy, but when you open for David Sedaris, you write these essays that are really quite hilarious. And how would you explain these two versions of you as a memoirist, right? You know,
Yeah.
how does that play out?
I think it's pure terror that makes me make people laugh, because I don't want to be up there and like nothing is happening.
Right.
Like, and I really didn't think I could write anything funny. I never did. And when David asked me, I thought, I can't say no, because it's just rude. And I thought, I'll just do it like once and I'll bomb and I'll never do it again. And then I got up there, and when people laugh, oh my God, it's the best. And you have like 500 people laughing at you. God, it's so good. So then I just wanted to keep doing it. And I steal from my son a lot. He's so funny. You're very funny. And so I take a lot of things that he does and use them, or I don't know. But there are a couple of pieces that in the book that are fun, well, hopefully, that I use to open for David. I just, yeah, it is weird. Like, it's a very different process and a different, and I take a lot of notes. Like, if something's funny, I try to write it down. So when I start a new essay to open for David, I'll just go through the file.
That's what's, yeah.
And if I'm like laughing a little, then I'm like, oh, I'll use that. And sometimes, like, the thing that I think is the funniest part, if it doesn't quite fit in the essay, I'll be like, I'm making it fit, because I need the laugh. Like, I have to.
Yeah, you're not gonna kill the darlings, and you need to do that.
Yeah, I'll rewrite the entire essay for, you know, a laugh.
Well, they work. They're very funny. Well, did I see a hand go up?
Oh, did.
given that, what's the tone of the fiction coming next?
Yeah.
Or give us a little elevator pitch, or
It's,
tease us to it.
so it's, the novel is, a woman in recovery tries to find a shortcut to redemption through voluntourism. So, she's on trips, and so my agent says, like, he'll say, like, well, that's funny, more of that. Okay. It was really hard to get that one part. So parts of it are funny. It's still like in that first draft where I'm still finding my way. So I hope it's funny. And a lot of times I'm not the best judge of if something I've written is funny. Sometimes, I'll get on stage and I'll think nothing in this is funny, and I cannot believe people are laughing. So I'm hoping that happens with the novel. I'm really hoping for that.
Are you looking at me for time?
We have probably 5 more minutes if
Okay.
we have a few more questions.
Okay. So, would you, there's a question, sorry.
I don't want to give away perhaps any of the gold in the book. I'll have to admit, I haven't read it yet, other than the first page, which is very gripping. But I'm also, I've been sober now for, I haven't thought about it in a while, 14 years. And I'm just curious, did you have a pivotal moment? Could you tell us, maybe it's already in the book, but could you tell us what that was like when you changed to sober?
Getting
Yes.
sober?
Yeah.
I think I had a different experience than a lot of people. I think I would get sober and then I'd relapse, and I did it again and again. And finally, I just decided I'm not keeping track anymore. And so I never did the day count. And it was like a slow process. It was, and I went to meetings in the beginning, and so there was not like a pivotal moment. It was just, I just could not keep up with that lifestyle anymore. And then the thing about it was that it just grows and changes. Like, I did not know how different recovery would be after 10 years and after 20 years. I think that with like 5 or 10 years clean, I still held out like, well, this terrible thing happens to me, I might use again. And now I feel like nothing could make me use again. There's no reservations. And I didn't know that it would change that much. And I think like nobody can tell you when you're, 6 months clean or a year clean, like, how much easier it'll be in 20 years, because you'd be like, fucking 20 years. I can't do it. But it does. It gets so much. Do you find that it gets so much easier?
Yeah, I still have cravings for alcohol. I stopped going to AA meetings because they just made me want to drink. People be talking about those frosty cold ones from, that they
Yeah.
pass up.
Yeah.
Oof. But, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. You were 14 years, at 20 years you won't have cravings anymore.
Yeah, that'd be good. I wish I had been told
You just
that
have
14
six
years
more
ago.
years.
I wouldn't believe
You
it.
just hang in
You're
there.
so close. So, in the wrap up, are you pleased? Are you having that classic writer's thing where you just, I just want to go back and tweak something? Or are you feeling like, okay?
I just really don't look at it. I know that, there are definitely things I would change. But I just won't entertain the idea of it. I am moved by the people I've talked to who have struggled and who share their experience with me.
Yeah.
That I didn't really picture happening, and I'm very pleased with that. I just think it's like the connection and the, I don't know, there's something about that that's really incredible, because you think like, before I wrote this book, I didn't know these different people, and that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
Well,
Thank you.
any more questions? The
It's
last
last
question?
chance.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.